Hello everyone. Just to give you a little bit more background to this study, it was a 3-year study funded by AGWA, or the Australian Grape and Wine Authority, and it involved a partnership, I guess, with 3 of the big wine regions here in South Australia, the Adelaide Hills, the Barossa Valley, and a single brand in the Clare Valley. So really what we were looking to explore in this study was how to further brand attachment within this particular context, although communities and people who come together to enjoy a certain product or service, this type of strategy could be applied to a number of other areas or other contexts or products or services. But in this particular case, we studied wine, because wine, of course, is a very social product. So what are we talking about when we talk about brand attachment? I guess in the old days, we used to talk about loyalty. And by loyalty, we meant how often a person purchased a product, the degree to which they were focused on that product and would not accept another. For example, people might be loyal to Coke, and they might not drink a cola at all if they couldn't get Coke. Other people might say, well, I actually really like cola, and so if I can't get Coke, I'll drink Pepsi if that's okay with me. So there's this attitudinal loyalty, and then there's this behavioral loyalty, which is a measure of how many times a purchase is repeated. But people have moved on from that. And now we talk about thinking about the real emotional side of loyalty and how a person might become attached to a brand, how they might want to actually incorporate that brand almost as part of their personality, and we do that all the time. And we do that, again, we see that in a number of products. Fashion, for example. People like certain labels, they like the look of a certain fashion brand, they say that they think that says something about them, or they want it to say something about them. And it might go as far, again, other product categories where this is common: cigarettes, soft drinks, cars, fashion, certain types of foods, certain types of activities or service providers. And today, whilst, every once in a while you hear and read something about the fact that consumers are not brand loyal anymore, I would dispute that. I think consumers are more brand loyal than ever. And they're not even loyal now, they become attached. And there's reasons for that in terms of benefits for consumers too. We might think about what a brand gets when consumers are attached to it, because that means that they will seek out that brand above all others. And of course that means more revenue for them, that means good word of mouth for them, that means that they don't have to work so hard to make an additional sale. These are all good things. And so you might say, well, what's in it for the consumer except what the utilitarian value or the emotional value of them having that brand in their life might be. But one of the big benefits that's coming out of research and some of the research done by others and by myself is that in today's very busy time, where people work longer, they have less time to spend on themselves perhaps, being attached to a brand is a great time saver. You're no longer faced with going into a place and having to go through the agony of evaluating all the different brands that you might consume, because you know what brand you want. So you might think about a brand that you like yourself and that you purchase continually or that you have as part of your life. And I'll put my hand up, I'm one of these people. I'm an Apple person. I'm unashamedly an Apple person. So when I need a new computer, all I've got to think about is that choice set within Apple. I don't have to think about, Samsung or Sony or a Toshiba. That's not on the menu for me. Same for a phone. Now I have that incorporated into my life with Apple TV. I'm going to go and get an Apple Watch very soon. I can't wait, actually. So what do I get from that? Well, I get all the compatibility. I get to enjoy all of the knowledge that I have about those products. They suit me, I like them. And also it saves me all the time and effort of thinking, because I've got lots, like you, I've got lots of other things that I'd rather be thinking about or that I must think about. So this heuristic, I think, is also becoming more and more important to people. Now, the thing about attachment, like even the old concepts of loyalty, is that it was established or sort of taken for granted that these feelings of attachment require lots of time and lots of repeat experiences. So one of the things that we were looking to investigate in this study was to see whether or not you could actually get some measurable difference through just one or two encounters. Now also, if we think about the context of wine, lots of people in industry have said to me, oh, look, people are only driven by price. There's no loyalty to wine brands. People might feel some loyalty to a region, but they'll say, oh, you know, if I want a good Riesling, anything from Clare will do. And I never believed that, because it's not true in any other product category. It's not true in beer, it's not true in soft drinks, it's not true in chocolate. So why would it be true in wine? And perhaps it's because, you know, dare I say it, some of the brands haven't worked very hard to try and engage consumers directly. Traditionally, most marketing efforts by a lot of wine brands are towards distributors, and they adopt more of a push strategy. So one of the other things we were looking to test in this study was more of a direct interaction between a brand and a consumer. So again, I've talked about some of these things before, but in terms of engaging with consumers directly, there are lots of benefits, but there are some risks too, because one of the other things today's consumer want is they want a say. They will not believe out of hand everything that a brand says about themselves. They're quite skeptical. They're skeptical of mass media. They really put a lot of credence, not always wisely, in word of mouth from people who prescribe themselves as experts, but they may or may not be. So one of the outcomes for brands when they go into this journey of trying to have a direct interaction with consumers and build attachment is that they have to understand that consumers then want to participate in how that brand is perceived and indeed how that brand may develop. So there are some risks. You get all the positives, which is good word of mouth. One of the most important ones, of course, is that attached consumers are not so concerned about price. Again, if I think about myself as an example, how much does a brand of phone that is not an Apple cost? I have no idea, because I'm never going to buy one, so it doesn't matter. How much does an Apple phone cost? I don't know, but I'm sure it's worth the price. I haven't checked the new Apple 6 price yet, but because I don't need one yet. But when I do, I'm quite certain that I'll pay it, as long as I continue to feel attached to that brand, and as long as I continue to feel that that brand gives me value. So these outcomes are this enhanced loyalty. You get defenders and advocates. You get low cost per sale. The other thing that some brands have leveraged very successfully is good ideas for new products. And again, Harley-Davidson became aware of this and have leveraged this for probably about 25 or 30 years. And you might think, you know, why does a Harley today have these big comfy chairs and aircon and stereos and drink coolers and all the rest of it? Well, probably because your average Harley driver these days is of a certain age and wants some creature comforts and has the money to pay for it. So they're a brand that has listened very carefully to what their consumers are telling them, and they've amended their products appropriately. So again, if you get your army of brand advocates, of attached consumers on side with you, you can use them for research, you can use them for feedback, you can use them for new product ideas, and again, there are a number of brands that do that very successfully. So again, just coming back to wine for the moment as a context for this kind of study in terms of building attachment, what is it about wine? Well, one of the important things to consider about wine is that it has absolutely no utilitarian value. You know, for all that, you know, it's good for you to drink a glass of red a day and all that sort of stuff, I was talking to one of our academics in health sciences the other day about that, and he said, well, to be fair, it probably doesn't matter what kind of alcohol you drink. A glass of beer will do the same job, and it has to do with all of the other benefits that make you feel good about the social interaction with other people and the context in which the alcohol is consumed, and so on and so forth. And we all know that, you know, it doesn't take very long to get to a point where alcohol is not very good for you. So for all intents of real practical purposes, we would have to say that wine has no utilitarian value. It is a hedonistic product. Doesn't apologize for that. Chocolates, ice cream, many other luxury products that we consume them because we like them, because they give us pleasure. There's nothing wrong with that. And wine is one of those. It's also a product that people become, like cars and beer and whiskey and other kinds of products, easily involved with. They can become quite intrigued by the product, become invested in it. It becomes a bit of a hobby for some people. They collect it, they trade it. They like to get together with like-minded individuals and chat about it and, you know, swirl and sniff and spit and carry on and, you know, talk to each other about the wine that they discovered here and the wine that they discovered there. And again, this is part of the overall value that a product like wine brings to life and brings to many people's lives. And I think we also need to remember that, particularly in our societies, wine has a highly symbolic place. You know, if you're depressed, sometimes you might go home and console yourself with a glass of wine. If you're celebrating, you celebrate with a glass of wine. If you're with your friends, let's have some wine. If you go out for dinner. So wine is a part of our everyday fabric for many people. But the thing to remember is that whilst people can become very involved with wine, my research shows pretty clearly that very, very few people ever become very knowledgeable about it. And I've looked. Trust me, I have looked. For my own PhD years ago, I developed a little objective test to see how much the average wine buyer, even those who bought a lot of wine and paid a fair bit for it, how much they actually knew about the product that they were consuming. And I developed that test based on the advice of experts. You know, can they understand the terms on a label? Can they do even basic food matching? Do they understand what types of wines are made from what varietals? Very simple, how to care for wine, you know, decanting of wine, etc. Very, very basic stuff. Not a test that someone could only pass if they were in the industry. And I've applied that test, I bet you 7 or 8 times now around the world. China, New York, Germany, Singapore, Australia 2 or 3 times. And the first thing that I'll say to you is out of 18 questions, something like 95% of people get less than 4 right. Are the results very different going from country to country? No. So do people in China know objectively less about wine than people in Adelaide? A little bit, but not much. The other thing I always test in line with that is people's self-assessed or subjective knowledge. So how much do they think they know? And it's usually 2 to 2.5 times more than what they actually know. So because I've had that consistent result so many times in so many places, now I only test subjective knowledge. I don't put people through the agony of the test, because usually they come away feeling pretty bad about themselves at the end of it. So, but that, you know, that as a winemaker or a wine marketer, you shouldn't be worried about that. Not at all. I mean, people don't really understand their computer or their car, nor do they want to. They don't really understand how the material in their favorite suit was put together. It's not important. It doesn't affect their enjoyment of that product. But as a wine marketer or a wine maker, it's important for you to understand that. So we need to know that their involvement is not affected by knowledge, their enjoyment of the product is not affected by that. So what I'm saying is, people who become highly attached to wine are never necessarily highly knowledgeable about it. What I've also found is the more involved people become with wine, the more attention and the more credence they put on things that are extrinsic to the wine. So this is things like the referral of someone that they respect or that they think knows something, country of origin, brand, price, and I've sort of italicized there, an experience with the wine that is memorable for them. And I was involved in a study several years ago where we measured the power of a tourism experience, a visit to a cellar door, or participation in a wine festival, how this could affect subsequent attachment to the wines that were consumed during those events. We found that indeed it could be. So again, we carried forward that knowledge into this study to say, well, how can we amplify that? How can we leverage what we know is already a very positive experience? So this is just a quick model from that particular study, which basically shows that if people have a good time, they feel quite a high level of stimulation, so they had a really good time, and they come away satisfied, then that will lead to their opinion of a tourism experience or a wine-related experience. These things can be moderated by, the degree to which they knew the place or the brands consumed prior to that experience. Then they will then blame their feelings, their good times, their feelings of pleasure on the brands that they consumed during that festival. So for example, if somebody goes to the Crush Festival up in the Adelaide Hills and they have a fantastic time, then much of what they attribute to that fantastic wine will be to the brands of wine that they consume there. If they can remember them, that's right. So you don't want them to move around too much, that's for sure. But anyway, they will at least say those Adelaide Hills wines were great, if they can't remember a specific brand. So then that leads to subsequent brand attachment. So that was established, we know that. So my questions were, in thinking about taking this experience, a cellar door experience or a festival experience, can we then fold into that our knowledge about the fact that consumers like to co-create events, and they do that at a cellar door experience or in a festival. They put themselves into it, they engage as much as they want. Whether or not they go alone or with someone else is their decision. The degree to which the products are consumed is their decision. So it's an unscripted event. Instigate or strengthen brand attachment. And then something that hadn't been tested before was, well, can we bring someone in from the brand to lead this interaction? Not someone who's paid to do so, not someone who's trying to necessarily sell them something, because again, we know that consumers, especially attached ones, like to hear from an expert. They want some authenticity, they want some insider knowledge. So can we bring someone in from a brand, a wine brand, to lead this, and in doing so satisfy some of the needs that we know from community research, to learn more about a product, to have a social experience, and to have fun. Again, because we know today's consumers are very sensitive to strong marketing campaigns. They know when people are being paid to endorse something. We needed to make sure that this person would be seen to be very unaffected by that. And if we can get that to all come off, then what will be the flow-on effects to word of mouth and willingness to pay a premium price? And can we do it online? Does the person have to actually go somewhere, or can they be at home and somehow do this? So we thought what we'd do was use as our brand ambassador a winemaker, somebody who is linked very strongly, obviously, as the creator of the product that people enjoy so much. We know that consumers kind of think that winemakers are kind of magical anyway, They can create this product that they enjoy so much that's a little bit mystical. So, and who would know more about the wine than the person who made it? Nobody, so that's perfect. We know that consumers are craving sincerity and authenticity, so it's a perfect fit. And some of the research that I'd done with premium winemakers, premium wine consumers, had shown that they really liked the idea of having the inside track, you know, some insider knowledge to be able to touch base with people who might be in the know on something. And then provide them through this interaction with the opportunity to ask their own questions and co-create an event. So we thought, fine, this is good. We can do this online, and we'll use live streaming and a live chat to do it. So what we did, I'll just go through this first. So essentially this was the model that we started to work with. We'd have a virtual cellar door experience, and we'd look at some functional benefits, some social benefits, see if we can stimulate engagement, and then have it flow on to where we really want to go, which is brand attachment and positive word of mouth. And our brand ambassador facilitates all of this process. So the next step was to think about how we'd set this up. And it was unbelievably easy, I have to say, and costs almost nothing. The Adobe Connect software you can download for free. I set up an account with some people in Canada called Netro Media. It was $150 a month, thereabouts. I got a $10 microphone and a $20 webcam, and opened up a Vimeo account because the video files are quite large, and away we went. The only other thing that had to happen, and there was some cost to this, but again, in the great scheme of things, when you think about what other marketing activities can cost, it was very cost effective, and that was to set up the chat environment within the brand's website. So our first test run was at the Adelaide Hills, and they created a space called the Adelaide Hills Wine Room. And then the next test was to go to the Barossa, and they set up a space called Barossa HQ, or Barossa headquarters. And then we created a space for our small individual wine brand in the Clare Valley, and we called that the Mount Sermon Wine Lounge. So here's a bit of a setup. Lots of fun we had. This was an office at the university, tiny office, and we dragged in the furniture from reception and put it in here. And they had some of these screens that they'd made up for their own events. And you can see down here, this is in the reception area after hours. There's our, highly sophisticated webcam sitting on the tripod. And this guy here, we had all sorts of very interesting events. This was a bit of a celebrity chef, and he had dry ice in there that he didn't tell me he was bringing, and he did frozen mandarins or something. And these are people from the Adelaide Hills who were there to talk about the wines that were being tasted with these particular products. So what happened from the consumer's point of view is all these regions had people in their membership bases. They had a list of people, and we went out to them and we said, please come and join the Adelaide Wine Room, the Adelaide Hills Wine Room. Doesn't cost anything. You'll get a sign-in, and we put together a schedule of events and the wines that would be consumed in those events. And for the people who were in the lab participating with us as respondents, we provided that wine. But people who started to just join the community organically, they would know that, so-and-so's Riesling is going to be tasted with the winemaker on this Wine Wednesday on this date, and they had the opportunity to get that wine. And then they could taste it and discuss it with the winemaker, or people participated with whatever they had in the house. Our first event was something called Hondorf Hill Chocovino, and they were tasting certain reds with chocolate, and people came in, and one guy came in and said, oh look, I haven't got that wine, but I found an old Easter egg in a bottle of Merlot. This is great. So it was about the experience. And sometimes people had the wine that was tested, certainly our respondents did, but people could come in with whatever they had at hand. So what we've got here is a food event. What we've got here is two winemakers who have a map of Italy there, and what they've set up on the table is all of the sensory aspects of those wines. So pepper, floral, citrus, to try and exemplify for people who came into the event what these wines were like, even if they didn't have them. So how it looks to consumers on the other side is like this. So pretty good actually. So you can see the chat happening here. You can see this person has the wine, they're at home, and that's the wine that's being discussed, and they're tasting it and interacting there. These are two guys from, from Shield Estate, and what was just that little corner of our reception area actually looks really good because there's only that little bit that's actually on the screen. So people said to us afterwards, God, you know, did you have a studio? Did you have, no, we had an office, and we had the furniture from reception, that's all we had. But it worked just fine. Oops. So here's an example of Jane Bromley and Hilton McLean, and they did a demonstration of how to make sparkling. Now this shows you how the brand ambassadors, in this case it's these two, interacted with the participants. So they see the live chat. So everybody signs in, and if I was signed in and asked a question, it would say Roberta, and then it would say my question. So Jane is reading the chat as it's going along, and if I asked her something about what she did, she would then respond to my question. So they interacted with people that way. But what happened very quickly was we started to see how much interaction sort of happened between participants. So there was all these sub-conversations going on as well. Again, people just enjoying the company of each other, as well as interacting and learning with our brand ambassadors. And you can see that that's the same corner of reception where Jane and those guys are hosting that event. And by the time I'd wound down the project, when I looked at some of the Vimeo stats for some of these videos, many of them had been watched hundreds of times. Now, what a lot of the wine brands did too is, of course, when they hosted an event, they would put a link to their video in their own website. And so people could look at the video both through, in this case, the Adelaide Hills website, but also through the individual brands' websites. Now this is my little brand up in the Clare Valley, Mount Sermon. So we created for them the wine lounge, and they were not winemakers, but they were part of the slow food movement, and so a big aspect of their cellar door offer is food. So what we did with them was we always had a cooking event, and a week, and again they had a calendar of events, and Jenny, that's Bert and Jenny Sermon, she would put the recipe up of what she was going to cook, and Bert was a real character and led the discussion, and she put the recipe up so that if people wanted to, they could cook along with Jenny. They could not just taste the wine, but they could actually cook with her in the kitchen. And they offered a tasting pack, so they had 6 events within a 6-month period, 1 a month, and they would say, here's the wines for our events upcoming, here's the recipes, join us. And if you ordered that tasting pack, then you got a Mount Sermon apron, so that you could put your apron on and cook with Bert and Jenny. And they used to put up little other little videos as well. Like I think they made yabbies one time, so there was a little video of Bert and Jenny out in the dam getting yabbies, and they made pasta, they did all sorts of things, which was fascinating. And so that's just rabbit stew with black olives is obviously what's happening there. And again, you can see Bert looking on the screen so that he can chat to people, and then the conversation is happening here. And then later on, the video was captured within their website so that you could go back to it. Now, we were learning all the time, and this project took a couple of years. And this I like to consider sort of the pièce de résistance. This was Barossa HQ, the next best thing to being there. And we learned a lot from the Adelaide Hills site and the sermon site, and we brought everything that we knew to this. And so people said to us, oh, we'd really like to have the tasting notes in advance of the event. Okay, no problems. So for Hallett's, we did that. There was a link to their website, to the tasting notes, a background on the presenter, etc., etc. And you can't really see it, but one of our participants who came in quite often said, oh, you know, I wish we had a like button, because people say things and we'd like to hit like. And so the designers for us, they said, no problems. We'll put a cheers button, and it's a little wine glass. And so when people liked a particular comment, they could cheer it. And then we had cheerleaders, you know, those people that got the most cheers. And then somebody else said, oh, I wish we had a Twitter feed. Okay, no problem. So we put the Twitter feed in. So this website became something pretty special. And this is just a close-up of James March from the Barossa and Stuart Blackwell. And the Twitter feed's happening here. And this was just the end of an event, so you can see people saying thank you and signing off, and you can see that this one got a couple of cheers. You can get a little better look at the little wine glass there. So from that particular event, we got some fantastic feedback, and one of the participants that we'd sort of incentivized to come along afterwards got in the car and drove out there. From just this one event, you know, the tasting panel was a delight. In fact, I took a trip with a friend to the Barossa solely for the purpose of visiting and hopefully meeting Stuart in person. You know, now the likelihood of Stuart being at the winery and in the cellar door probably is just about zero, but nonetheless, they felt that they had enjoyed his company and learning from him enough that they got in the car and drove. So I wouldn't have found this gem if it was not for you. Thanks again. And here it is. I will spread the good word among my friends. How good's that? So again, quite an easy thing to organize and provides quite an impressive result. Now these guys up here are interesting because two of them were participants, they were incentivized respondents, and they just kept coming back. And then they brought in two other friends. So you can see they've got their laptops and their iPads, and they just became regular participants. And were really good ambassadors for the events, and they sent us that picture of them at home taking part in one of the events. So as part of the formal surveys that we did, this is just you know, some of the feedback. A great idea, a great way to showcase some excellent wines. I had fun. I'd be more than happy to do it again. So again, you know, this is what we were trying to achieve. Relaxed, down to earth, felt like a personal encounter with nice people. That's great, you know. And this is the power of bringing consumers and someone closely associated with a product that they're interested in. And this was only the effect of one event. So, in a quantitative sense, you can see we looked at the Mount Sermon community, which was just our little individual brand, and then the HQ community, which was the Barossa. And we can see very significant effects from the brand ambassador as the catalyst through to learning satisfaction, social satisfaction, and emotional satisfaction, having fun, and then engagement with the event, uniqueness, and then we looked at the difference in the attachment with the brand. So we did a before and after survey. We asked people how, we measured how attached they were to, in the case of the Barossa Valley, wines from the Barossa, and then some 10 days to 2 weeks later, we stimulated them through the event, and then we measured it again. So what we're reporting here is the difference, which again is still significant and substantial, and more importantly, difference in word of mouth and willingness to pay. So, for example, what they felt before the event, what they felt a bottle of Barossa wine was worth to what they thought it was worth after the event, saw an increase of $2.75 a bottle, which is not bad. So the other interesting thing, of course, is that we never did any promotion of these communities at all. We just ran the events. We incentivized, between 10 and 15 people to participate in each event, and without doing absolutely anything, we still, in 6 months, got 400 people involved in that particular community, 350 in that one, and 90 for Bert and Jenny, and they didn't even have a website really before we started. So it sort of gives you a little bit of, an idea about what you could really do with this kind of strategy if you made it part of your marketing efforts and really put some work into it. So I guess what we had sought to achieve was that yes, you can instigate brand attachment and you can significantly and substantially affect it, even from one encounter, if the encounter is positive and interesting and engaging. And it also showed how consumers relate to people who they feel are credible and authentic about the product and not trying to sell them something. An important thing to remember about this is these events were totally unscripted. They went where they went. People talked about, God knows what. We had one winemaker from the Barossa who, a female winemaker, and one of the ladies who was participating said, "Oh, what do you like about living in the Barossa?" And she said, "Oh, I really like, something along the lines of, I really like raising my kids here." So then this winemaker and this particular woman participant and one other, they then engaged in a 5-minute conversation about raising kids and environments for kids, nothing to do with wine, right? But it was just an example of them being able to have a conversation that they were driving, that they were co-creating with this person. So our winemakers got asked all sorts of things. We were always there to moderate the conversation, but we never really had to. Nobody asked anything that was inappropriate, and there was lots of joking and banter going back and forth, and people were also free to say that they didn't like the wines, and some people did. The winemaker would say, "Well, what do you think?" And sometimes people would say, "Well, I don't like it as much as this wine, or I don't like it as much as that varietal." And the winemaker went, "Well, okay, fair enough. What kinds of wines do you like then?" So, we did a lot of coaching with the winemakers to make them prepared for these events and to be able to deal with perhaps criticism when it came along and turn it into a positive thing. And that all went very, very well. So I guess the sort of takeaway is that this is something that is not difficult to do. It's not expensive to do. It can be very powerful. And you just need, of course, to plan things appropriately, to make sure that people are coached and have an understanding of how these sorts of events, the dynamics of these events and how they work. But if you're willing to make that investment and you're willing to really, engage with your customers one-on-one and listen to what they have to say and take it on board, then you can really do a lot to improve the power of your brand in a direct way with consumers without having to rely on middlemen to or advertising to do that for you. Okay. So that comes to the end of the research, and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody would like to ask me any.